You're live.
Hi, everyone. We are live. This is so unusual. Hi, this is the Mercedes Lucky Benedict Show, and we are doing something phenomenal tonight. We are actually doing our visual live stream, and I have my amazing guest, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz, with us. Woohoo! You
Yes, hello
get a
everybody.
poinsettia.
Oh, how nice. Is that for me? Is that for me, Mercedes?
Yes. It's for you. Thank you for so much for being here on the show tonight on my Christmas special end of the year extravaganza. That's I wanted Dr. Kelly Schutz to be with me.
I'm here. But you know what, Mercedes? What I didn't plan, what we did not plan is that I'm wearing green and you're wearing red. So guess what? Christmas colors right there, right?
Yeah, looky there. There you go. See? It's the Christmas. I only just realized I was going to change my set just like an hour ago, so don't worry. It wasn't like really pre-planned. Usually I'm just out here with no makeup and just like in my thing. So anyway, enough about that. I have you here for an hour and I really have a lot to say, and I would love to hear you talk about all the amazing things that you've been doing the last few months, especially. You you've just been doing a lot, and so just to kind of bring everyone to the forefront, just in case you are tuning in, if you're on Facebook, hi, or any of the streaming platforms that this is going on, or anyone that has listened to the show before, you may have caught Dr. Kelly on a previous show, or possibly you're coming here because you already, keep an eye out on what she's doing. So that's just awesome. So what we are doing here is we're going to be talking to Dr. Kelly about the paranormal, about her books that she's written, so many amazing books, all the conferences that you've been going to. So enough said, let's hear all about what you've been doing.
Oh my goodness. And I mean, do you have like 6 hours? Because that won't even touch it really. So all right. So where do we begin? I feel like sometimes it's like going into one of those formal interviews. They always say, tell us a little bit about you. And you sit there like deer in headlights because it's like, well, do you want to know the working side of me? Do you want to know the creative side of me? A lot of times people don't usually know how to handle that question, but let me just give you kind of a feeler for what's been going on here with me. So for those of you that have not been following me or don't know who I am known as Dr. Kelly, and I am worldwide, just like you are, Mercedes, worldwide. And I have been podcasting for the last 7-8 years. I have a top ranked show, and I have also, within the last year and a half, I have my own TV talk show called Disembodied Voices, which is on Paraflix, which is a streaming network, and it's very similar to Netflix with the exception that it's all paranormal. And so I interview a lot of celebrities, I interview a lot of experiencers, researchers, filmmakers, authors, you name it. I grab them just like you, Mercedes, and I grab you and I drag you onto my show, and we talk for about an hour about whatever, whatever comes to mind. Probably my biggest interview though was in Utah with the Skinwalker Ranch gentleman. And that was interesting because not everybody gets an opportunity to sit privately with them in a media group and kind of pick their brain as to what they can share and not share. So I've had quite a lot of interesting guests and stories, and everything from demonology to just, spirituality, energy, anything you name it, I've had it. So that's what I have been up to. I just finished my another season, well, 2 seasons actually, with 17 guests as of a couple days ago. So I'm taking a little break, as they say, until I start up season 12, and we're just finishing season 9. And so I am a busy camper and I'm well sought out, and that's nice, but I need more time to myself once in a while. You were asking about books. Well, I have about 11 books on Amazon. The two behind me are two of three popular books that I have out. Haunted Life, wrong hand. Haunted Life being the most probably sought out book, just because it also has in there some of my extraterrestrial visitations. And so I have about 100 paranormal experiences, which never end, and then some extraterrestrial under my belt. And so basically, my life history and story now is just paranormal and trying to figure out what I just encountered. And Mercedes, you can relate to all of this stuff, and that's exactly how she and I met. Was your debut on the Dead Files with your situation, and so here you are, and here I am. And does that give you kind of a good enough overview as to how busy I am?
Yeah, I and plus you've been traveling, I know too. But yeah, so I love how you use the word experiencer. I think
Yeah.
that I love that word. And I also love that you're, like you're saying that the experiences really never end. I mean, they always continue in one form or another. And one thing I'll just kind of a sidetrack was I know that you just went to across the world to Europe. Now, when you're in Europe, do you ever feel like it's a totally different thing? Like, is the paranormal different there when because I'm sure you probably possibly experience things pretty much everywhere.
Well, to answer that question, actually, a few years ago, I went to Europe to try to answer that question. Actually, are the
Oh,
experiences
wow.
in Europe any different than or more intense than they are here in the US? So keep in mind that my journey started, of course, in the US. It started at a lot of perceived, known, haunted bed and breakfasts, wanted to explore a place where at least people were still going and visiting, and I had a multitude of experiences at a variety of places, and still do, actually. But when I went over to Europe, one of the things that, I mean, I had some very traumatic experiences over in Europe. Keep in mind, some of these properties are 900 years old that I've actually been in. A few castles, a few structure kind of buildings that are still standing. And I don't know if they would be any more traumatic than something that might happen here, but the experiences that I had over there were more traumatic. Now I'm gonna preface that a little bit here. There are reports that people that have um, gone over to some of these castles and have gone over to some of these places, they are reporting, well, I don't have an experience, or I don't know if there's any hauntings or ghosts to be found anymore. They just didn't seem to come out to me. Well, you have to remember something about your ability to have an experience. Not always, just because you don't have an experience doesn't mean that something is not there. Sometimes there's a reason why these things are not showing themselves, or maybe the conditions aren't right. There's all kinds of factors. Now, when I was there and I had some situations, I wasn't looking into environmental, like, Mercury retrograde or anything like that, to see if things would come out a little bit more stronger. I can
Mm.
tell you, though, that we have been having solar flares lately, and a lot of them. And when the solar flares hit or come and they hit the Earth, that they have a tendency to cause a lot more. Hauntings and a lot more activity. And so, I guess to answer your question, I'm not really sure if it's any more traumatic, but I do know that the cases I had were more traumatic. And I don't know why. Could have been timing. So,
Were they, I think this would be a great book for you to write. I think that, because that, what a neat question. And you actually have experience. You actually did that.
Yeah.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
So when you say more traumatic,
Hmm.
are you saying that you felt as if they followed you, they were connected in you, they made you sick or disturbed your mental? Was it for a long time periods or just briefly?
Well, I can answer that with an illustration of two cases here. I'm going to compare them.
Okay.
So let's start with a US example. And I always bring this one up because this actually happened in Zach Bagans' Haunted Museum in Las Vegas. Now, for me, and for anyone who is noted as being perhaps a beacon, someone who attracts these things to you very readily, sometimes I wore a cross in Zach Bagans' museum, and hoping that that would uh, deter any kind of activity that I had that may have been coming to myself. Now, I started out walking through that museum without a problem. I thought, well, what's the big deal? It's like walking through an antique store, right? But it was about halfway through when I actually got frequency punched, as I would say, going up the back stairs of something where whatever it was actually was following me throughout the museum, and little things were happening, such as feeling scratches, having puppets move in the puppet room, being in the coffin room and feeling scratched and very sick, and wanting to get out of there, where the energies were really quite strong. And then as I was going up the stairs, something just like sucked the living daylights out of me, where I basically collapsed on the stairs and shut down the place for about 8 minutes. Now, that was what I would consider to be one of my more traumatic experiences in the US. Now, comparing that to a traumatic experience in Europe, I was in I suppose you could call it a bed and breakfast, a 900-year-old property that was known to have about 12 different apparitions floating around in there. And everything from a 5-year-old boy that would like to pound on doors and kind of whimper for help. And when people would open up the door, there would be either a little boy standing there, or there would be nothing standing there, all the way to this something that was in my room, which, by the way, I had to convince them to put me in the most second haunted room in that building, where it was, if you've ever walked into a room before and felt a heavy presence and you felt really sick and nauseated, that was the heaviness that I felt going into that room. And the other thing about that room is you needed to ask permission to be able to be allowed to come into that room, because the key didn't often work um, just for anyone to go into that room. And there were things that happened in there, such as their handprints on the pillow. Now, people can say, oh, they're just doing that as a scare tactic. No, there were really seriously handprints on my pillow. The mirror, there's a floor length mirror that actually started cycling around just as my husband threw the holy water towards the bed in that room. And I was facing this mirror, and it literally revolved around a few rotations. And that scared the living, you know what, right out of me. And people are like, oh, was that did they rig that? No, they did not rig the mirror. I don't know if something flew into the mirror. I don't know if something was how it managed to cycle it around, but it was facing me and just terrified me to death. And then I felt a cold presence on my body. I felt something sit on my legs. The wardrobe door was open in the morning, and there was no way I could just get out of that room and stay out of that room, because the whole place was so haunted with apparitions that, number one, I wouldn't have been able to find my way back down to the lobby. Number two, they said that if you didn't want to stay in that room, they basically said, we're tired of having people sleep in the lobby, okay, and stuff. And then so they're basically warning me. But the really humorous part to that frightening experience, which, by the way, I put a black mask over my eyes because I couldn't go anywhere. I was just terrified. My husband went to sleep. It's almost like something conked him out and kept him out. It's kind of a typical thing. But anyway, the next day when we left and I looked like a train ran over me, what happened was the manager said, I'm going to cough a second. The manager said, I need you to come back up in that room with me. And I said, I do not want to go back up in that room. It is very haunted. I've got my information from my chapter in my book. Thank you so much. And we went up and she brought me over to the mirror. She said, this mirror is something's wrong with this mirror. She said, every time the maid wants to vacuum and vacuums the floor near it, it lifts up the bottom of its rim of the bottom of the mirror and it hits her in the butt. And so I think, I said, it has a humorous part. It's a flirty part to it too. That's interesting. But it all the time, this was more than one occasion. So I don't know why they don't get rid of that mirror, knowing that it's a very active mirror and it actually does move and it really revolves and it's really strange what's happening with it. But that was as terrifying as the Zach Bagans hotel or museum situation if you want to line them up next to each other. So yeah, I've
Okay.
had all kinds of experiences.
Wow. Okay. Well, I knew about the Zach Bacon one, so I definitely, I feel as if, like, if we look at The Conjuring or we look at the Warrens, and they had their special place where they put all of their things that nobody was supposed to be around. So, I mean, obviously there are such things as haunted objects. We have dealt with that a lot here. I've definitely dealt with that as you have. But yeah, so that one is just basically you go in there and you're at the mercy of that. But that's why people go there,
Mhm.
you know. And there's the
Yep.
haunt. I'm sure I've had plenty of experiences here on this property and other properties with haunted mirrors. So I know a lot about that. And in the past, they still do it. They'll put a
Mhm.
black covering over it, you know.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
so I'm sure that
they believe
I'm,
they believe they believe that if you do that, so if someone were to pass away in the room, they do that to try to not have that soul go into that mirror. Is that your understanding as well?
yeah. Or I mean, there's other ones. I mean, I've just read or heard too, but the mirrors, they're just portals. People in and out of these mirrors, and but yeah, I think it could. I think it's probably different traditions, possibly because I think that in the Winchester house. Have you ever gone to the Winchester house? I've never
No,
gone there.
I haven't gone there. Maybe someday I'll get there, but I hear it's, with all these different rooms and stuff, or these stairwells that lead to nothing, and all these little things that she had. That's crazy. I mean, it's just kind of, I don't know if my mind can wrap itself around what she was going through or what was happening to her when all of
Yeah.
the construction was going on.
Yeah. And it went on forever, like a long, long, long time. But I remember reading something about where I think it originally she would put things over the mirrors at that time, some of the documented information. And then I guess it just became to where she didn't do that anymore. But wow, that's an amazing experience. Now, when you do that, you wrote that in a book then, right? So you put that in one of your chapters?
Mhm. Yeah, when I first went in there, and people, you need to kind of go into my world. Back when I went there, I felt like, oh, big girl from the U.S., coming over to Europe. I'm gonna search for some ghostly activity and prove to myself that stuff over in Europe can talk to me just as well as any other place. But when we first got there, And I did ask to be put in the most haunted room. Now, keep in mind, they put me in the second most haunted room. And if this activity was that extreme going on in the second most haunted room, the first most haunted room, which she absolutely refused to put me in, was a room where a female hung herself, back in the day, from the rafters, and she did
Mhm.
not like men. And so if there was a man staying in that room, she would show herself by dangling with, say, pretend you're laying on a bed, you're on your back, and you're looking towards the ceiling. Okay, the most haunted thing that would happen, especially if you're a man, this woman apparition would show. She would be showing being hung, and her feet would be dangling about maybe 6 inches to 12 inches above your face. And so that was that. She didn't like men at all, so she'd appear that way. And then usually that's when the manager was saying, yeah, they won't stay in this room more than 20 minutes because they're always down here sleeping in the lobby, and I can't really have that. And what was really interesting about that, though, is also not even inside the room. There was a painter painting the hallway just outside that room once, and once again, just right next to that room. These are true stories. The painter was going about his business, and then he felt something on his shoulder, like someone was tapping him. Well, when he turned and he kind of turned around and looked up, it was toes dangling from the ceiling, yeah, knocking against his back, as if something was tapping him. And so all he did was he laid down his paintbrushes, and he walked down to the manager's, downstairs, and he said, this is a very sad place. This is what he said, and I will not be returning. And he just left everything set, and he completely just walked out and everything. But that was just outside that room, so it wasn't always above the bed. But that one kind of got to him. So some of this is so hard sometimes to believe that this stuff can actually occur. But this guy had no knowledge of the hauntings in that building. He was just there to paint. So there are always lots of strange things that can happen. But then the question you might want to ask is, well, why do they only happen to certain people? Or why doesn't everybody have an experience? Well, there's a lot of factors that go into that. Sometimes people are very, I call them logical minded. So, logical minded people that are very strong in that capacity, are they going to debate and be more of a skeptic to a lot of this stuff and not as open? So, they probably won't have too much. Whereas I'm very open. I'm open to a lot of things. So, I'm kind of like a beacon. And so every time I'm walking somewhere, someone says, oh, I can talk to that person. That's not a problem. And then they start showing themselves in various ways. But there's a lot of reasons. It could be timing. It could be environment. It could be all kinds of things. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Mercedes? I mean, you've had quite a few experiences.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think some of us have a little bit more intuitive abilities or things that have happened. But yeah, I have dealt with the gamut of different people that have experienced things, or just absolutely think it's a bunch of crap. Excuse my word. I
Right.
was just I
Yeah.
was yeah I was just listening to our mutual friend, in a way, Truth Seeker, and I was editing, and there's this quote he says, and it's really priceless, and it helps me, because it's like he's basically saying that there are people that absolutely won't understand at all, but the ones that have experienced this, or that have lived and experienced, you don't have to convince them. I mean, they
No.
already understand. And so I think that there's a lot more people out there that, do believe, and I actually think that in Europe or other countries, I think people always believe. They believe that there is, like, right here in Tucson, or we're outside of Tucson, but the Day of the Dead. I mean, it's part of the tradition is to have these times with the dead and to acknowledge them and to celebrate them, their lives, like they believe that. So I mean, and I do too. So yeah, I think I think it's very interesting. It's a very interesting subject to go into. And one of the things, while we're kind of talking about this, people may have always may think, oh, well, Dr. Kelly, Renee Schutz, well, she's just always a paranormal person, but really you and I are kind of similar, where you were on one track, and
Mhm.
then you did that life, and then you went into a different life. So can you tell the audience a little bit about what you did before? It wasn't paranormal.
Well, I think one of the things that's important here is when I interview people on my show too, I always start by asking them about where did this all begin for you? Because
Yeah.
I've found that with people's experiences, it's not always paranormal, spiritual, or whatever. It's all kinds of things and it's not always being a real young person either. Sometimes they come into their what we call an awakening, when they're older. So what happened with me was when I was younger. Now keep in mind, this goes back quite a while, where when I grew up, and with most people, religion was the foundation to all of our lives. Everything that revolved or happened was something that was spiritual, in the sense of a religious spirituality in nature. So if anything occurred or anything happened, then chances were likely God or some higher power had something to do with it. And so I had experiences when I had experiences when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, where I was having dreams, and would see these terrible tragic things happen on TV. And this is back in with black box televisions, black and white, and I would see these airplane crashes or these terrible tragedies or assassinations or whatever, literally in my dream, and then the next day I would see them play out on television. And after a while, I started thinking that I was the one causing that. It was just too weird and too coincidental, to the point where I didn't want to think about this stuff anymore. But as I started getting older, then I would stay in my grandparents' house, which your grandparents to be people of love, and so you figure you're in a safe environment. Well, I was being attacked by something in that house, but wasn't quite understanding at the time that was happening to me, where I was pushing it off as just being by myself sometimes, or nervous or whatever. But I literally, when I look back now, I had a number of experiences from hearing chatter in the kitchen, and getting, them not being home. And I would get up and I would walk to the kitchen, and then it'd be dead silent. And that's a key thing that I want people to remember here. If it is ever dead silent, that is an indicator that there is something in your environment that cannot be explained. And so that's when I first learned that something was going on with me, and I didn't want to stay there very often. It always scared me. But then when things would happen, it wasn't quite paranormal at that point. It was more spiritual, right? Something weird was going on, or maybe it was more demonic, or something like that. And so yeah, I went from very strong religion to more of the angel, guardian angel type thing. Then all of a sudden it turned into, no, I don't think it's that. Then it went paranormal. And when I mean paranormal, I'm talking about hauntings with disembodied apparitions, or apparitions that were still hanging about, or whatever, or residual energies, or whatever you want to call it. And then that evolved again, just about the time I thought I had all the answers. Then that evolved once again to a new aspect of my life. I had a handprint show up on my body one evening, and I've had a number of things happen to me, and healings, by the way, with, I believe, truthfully, that things are of an extraterrestrial type nature and markings, and even the possibility that I could have maybe possibly some kind of a tracking implant inside of me somewhere, which has not been really brought up to me just yet. So I'm going on this journey, and then it's all about energy. And what kind of energy are you? It's more like this. What kind of energy did you experience today? Well, I experienced this kind of energy, or it might have been residual or intelligent or whatever. So I'm evolving in the realm of energy to the point where I am experiencing stuff that I cannot explain, that usually cannot be explained. And so that's how I'm evolving. And I hope that answered your question, but that's kind of the short and skinny. And along the way, I've had incidents with over 100 different types of energies and behavior of this energy. Whoa, I just got for those. Okay. So sorry about that, but I did that. I do have hauntings that do occur when I am interviewing my guests or being interviewed by guests, including any kind of energy that comes from their situation into mine. And just a moment ago, something decided to make itself known to me. I'm very sorry about that, but that's why I reacted the way I did. So you're going to see me often on my own shows have things happen that cannot be explained. So anyway, sorry about that, Mercedes, but we have something in the
No,
room with us, right? So
yeah, no, I'm in the cabin, so I know that there's
mhm.
always something or someone in here. Um, well, one of the things I was going to also say is that you were actually, uh, working in a university, so you had a
Mhm.
job where you were doing that for a long time, and then after that, you went into doing the paranormal show
Yeah,
on Parafin.
yeah.
So that's a big jump, big
Mhm.
transition. And
Yeah,
and I 12 seasons. This is coming up 12 seasons. That's a lot.
yeah. And in a year, in about, I would say a year and almost a half time, I've had interviewed at eight people a season, 8 to 9 people a season. You do the math. It's like and 12 seasons. That's over 100 and some people that I have interviewed on my show right now, with all kinds of experiences and expertise. And yeah, going back to the just for those of you who want to know, I used to be like, I'm like a Jacqueline of all trades, but I've done various careers in my life. But my primary focus in the end was 20 years of being a college professor, teaching, and then also working in law for 8 years, plus some undercover duties. And I used to have experiences in my classroom. And if you can only imagine all kinds of weird stuff going on, even including the whispering in my students' ears and stuff. We were where I was at and where my classroom was at. We were on a property that used to have, I believe it's called a sanatorium or something like that, where there was a terrible tuberculosis or that type of outbreak. And for some reason, some of this stuff still is hanging around. And so they would come to my classroom, and I would know when something was kind of in there messing with my equipment or messing with my students or whatever, trying to get my attention all the time, and to the point where I couldn't deny it anymore. Now, it's very hard to do your job really well when you have these disturbances going on in your classroom. And I write about that a lot in my book as well. But yeah, and from a legal perspective as well, just to give you a flavor of that, I was having a heated debate with a few people in the office at one point. So we had to go into a meeting about it. And there was a law book that literally, I kid you not, flew off the shelf in that room. And it didn't fall off, it flew off the shelf. And it was almost hit the person that I really wanted it to hit, right? And so, of course, everybody turned around. Yeah, I know. Just about the time you want to hit somebody, you just look at a book and it flies off the shelf. But Yeah, the thing is about that though is that they all looked at me when that book went flying off the shelf. Now that room also, keep in mind that an attorney who resided in that room, in that office, he was gone for the weekend, so we used that office, but he had rocks literally on top of every single pile that had papers on it, because something tells me he would always come into his office. Something just tells me, and papers are probably all laying on the floor, all mixed up. So you go in there and you see these rocks sitting on top of everything. So it's almost like they knew that there was some kind of activity going on in that office area. But it was the point where that book flew off the shelf and nearly hit this man that I couldn't stand, that I thought to myself, I wasn't really that shaken by it. I just kind of looked and I thought, darn, missed him by an inch, and then turned around and just kept going. But there are things, but the question now is that, was that
Mind.
something there doing that on my behalf because he or she felt like I was getting the bad end of the stick, or was that me because throughout the years I've learned I'm telekinetic, psychokinetic, I'm telepathic, I've got all the clairs, and my abilities are strongest when I'm usually more low frequency rather than a high frequency. Low frequency meaning more tired, groggy, a little bit depressed. Then things activate a little bit more stressed. And so I started
That's
to wonder if that was me. I just don't know.
That's well, yeah. The first thing I was thinking of is they can read our minds and thoughts, and that's how they work. But that's interesting that you're saying that you have actually more insight when you're in a lower frequency. And I
Mhm,
I think I do too sometimes. Like
mhm,
I can't explain that, but that's very interesting. I was gonna share with you when you said that today. The weirdest thing happened at the grocery store today, and
mm,
nobody else paid any attention to it. It was like, I'm like, I can't believe these people did not pay attention to this, because there was at least five different types of people on this row. And I'm like, it's about 30 feet away from me. But all of a sudden, I'm watching, and it was at the dairy section thing because I was going to get
mm,
Joe some cheese. And this thing just flies off, and it flies off a shelf like I don't even know how, and it lands really loud on the floor, and I'm just like, it was like a rack, like
mhm,
a thing, like there's no way it would just like fly off the shelf, I don't think. And so I'm just
mhm,
watching, and nobody pays any attention. And so then I'm just like getting, and I walk up and I'm like, because it's right in the middle of the thing. And I'm like, I picked it up and I put it to the side, and I started to look like, how in the heck could this heavy thing just whoom off? And I swear to God, I was like, there's something. I believe that there's stuff in every store. When I go to Walmart, I put on my shield of protection. I mean, we used to do the violet fire before we even just were driving down the road, and we'll violet fire everything. And
mhm,
just to prepare to get in that store, because it used to be traumatic for me. I used to, when I didn't know, back when I didn't know about any of this, I literally was like a victim, a V, because I would not know. And I would go into a mall, and all of a sudden something would just come into me, and I would just be morbidly sad.
mhm,
Usually it was sad. And I mean, they're like crying sad. And I never understood it. I mean, I spent a lot of my life not understanding how things were
mhm,
affecting me until I was forced to look at what was affecting me by death,
mhm,
almost dead
right.
a couple of times or three times. So yeah. See, doesn't that sound weird? Like, but nobody paid
I can
attention.
I can help you there. I can help you. So, or let me just add to that. So it was during a very strong moon. I can't remember what they called it. It was a strong moon night or whatever day. My husband and I Had just had the conversation walking into the grocery store. True story. I've got it in my book. Got an illustration of it actually in my book. Um, Walked it also into the store, and we were going down the produce aisle. You know how they have those little tubs with all the cherry tomatoes in them, and they have the covering, the
Yeah.
plastic covering over it. All right, so we were going into the store, and I was commenting to him about how we're going to have this really strong moon that evening, and he's like, "Oh, malarkey." And this is when he was yeah, pretty skeptic, right? So we walk into the store, and he decides to go down one aisle. I decide I'm going to go down this other aisle. And what jumped off the shelf, yes, it actually happened. It didn't fall off. It jumped off, was that container of cherry tomatoes. And you would think that when it jumped off and leaped, that it would have splattered and opened up and cracked open, and all the little tomatoes would have been all over the floor. Well, no, actually, it landed. The way it landed was like it kind of did a somersault, and it kind of landed on its, on its bottom. And he says out loud, "What the blank?" And I turned and looked over at him, and I said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I didn't do anything." He said, "This container just jumped off the shelf in front of me, about 4 feet, right in front of me, and it landed." I said, "Well, pick it up off the floor. I don't want to pay for that. I don't want to, put it back where it belongs." But that actually also happened to us. And so then I started investigating just a little bit, wondering how on earth did this thing happen, right? Sometimes, like with solar flares, sometimes there's ley lines that go directly through certain areas in certain places, and people don't realize that they can go through homes. I used to have ley lines go through one of the houses that I lived in. I didn't know this, but some psychic picked up the fact that there were ley lines going through. It is possible that a jolt of energy could have hit that thing right at the right time, and then it flipped it off the shelf, and then it landed on the ground. Or that's one theory. Another theory could have been that when he was going, "Oh, malarkey," as we were walking into the store, that if there was some type of apparition nearby or around us or whatever, heard that and wanted to demonstrate to him that this stuff can happen. And that startled him and scared. It didn't scare him, it startled him. And then I'm yelling at him to pick it off the floor, right? Because I didn't want to pay for it. So there's that aspect too. And then there's the other aspect, once again, that I am also telekinetic, psychokinetic, where I can actually move things as heavy as 25 pounds and have them catapult off of things such as a backpack, off of a bench or something like that. And I've had many things happen with my energy and stuff. So if I'm activated in the right way, I could have looked over at that, and something, I could have hit something and it could have flipped off that way. So there's many different theories that we can go by. Now, when that happened with you, Mercedes, and nobody else seemed to pay attention, that's always the case. It's always the case that people are so aloof, and they're distracted by other things, that what they would blame it on first would be you accidentally, something actually jiggling it or something, and it would just naturally fall over, and they would think that you caused it, or it, is caused because of some kind of vibration. So, it is fascinating. But you and I have had the experience of the jumping item in a grocery store. That's what I find very interesting right now.
That is fair. I mean, yeah, I think that's the first time that's happened. So it's really amazing and
Mhm,
happened to you. It doesn't surprise me
mhm.
at all.
Yeah.
Uh, the ley line, that thank you for bringing that up, because I was just talking on the Archbishop Ronald Fay Enright's new podcast.
Mhm,
And I remember, like, I really wasn't expecting. I didn't realize they were going to be asked. I thought they were going to ask all the people these questions. So I
mhm,
was quite shocked when I was on this, that it was actually just me answering these questions about things like paranormal possession and things.
mhm,
And so it brought up something. I was like bringing things up,
mhm,
and one of them is I believe it is ley lines. I believe that the lines that are coming, the people that I would see walking, and I wonder if that's, I don't know if we've ever talked about that, but I mean, they're dead people walking, and they walked in
Mhm.
different directions, and they walked like above each other, like they didn't really walk, I don't think it was through, but it was like two different ways, but above each other and below each other. And I believe that those were, I know that we have the ley lines here, and I'm sure that that brings on a lot more paranormal activity. So if you've ever had that experience where you see people walking that are dead, that would be interesting, because that's something that's always been part of my, and even still today. I mean, just
Mhm.
like this week, I saw them again.
Mhm.
Even during the
Mhm.
COVID, I don't bring this up
Mhm.
ever, but now that I'm talking about stuff, they had masks. They were dead with
Hmm.
masks during COVID.
Oh,
So
interesting.
yeah, they had masks on, and so I thought that, I remember telling Joe and my friends that I talk about, like that was, yeah. So I don't see them with masks on anymore. So what about you? What happens with you with all that? Anything?
Well, the ley lines, again, for people to understand what they are, they're like energy lines, and there's many energy lines that go through very specific locations. And so when they get activated, like such as we've had these solar flares, I mean, for some of you out there right now, you might be aware that we're in the period of time right now where we're having really incredible northern lights and in various places too, and they're actually very fantastic. And I'm ready to go to Alaska to hopefully, my husband reported tonight that we may only see them on arrival because we're not sure if it'll be cloudy the other days, but that's why we're going up there. I'm hoping to see these fantastic northern lights, even though in many places you can see them here in the States, out in some very dark areas. But, the thing is, it's really hard to know what gets activated and why, because there are portals. There's portals that open up and then they close up again. And so things seem to be active when portals open up because you don't know what's coming through them. And a lot of times we can't see what's coming through them, but we can hear it. So, for an example, I know I've got a portal. Or at least two in the house that I currently reside in, and I've had portals in my other homes. Well, my husband did report the other night I've had some really weird stuff happen in our master bedroom, and stuff that people would go, "Are you crazy?" It's like, "No." "Are you sleeping?" "No." "Can you hear it?" "Yes." "Can you see it?" "No." And just things like, I'll give you some really weird illustrations. So let's see. The other night, which is only a couple nights ago, he said, "Did you hear that last night?" And I said, "What are you talking about? What was in this room?" He goes, "I heard something. Something sounded like a bottle of some sort, literally tip over, fall over, and it was very loud." And I said, "No, I didn't hear it because I was probably sleeping." And I said, "I have no idea what made that noise, but I do know that behind my head, that's where the portal would open up and close. I just know that." I've heard in our bedroom as well what sounded like, for those of you who are Star Trek fans, if you remember when they always go on the bridge and it's like, da-da-da-da, and it's beam me up, Scotty kind of thing. Um, there's a sound that sounds like something, it would sound like something like a craft or a ship where something was like opening up, and you could hear it opening up, and then, and you could hear it open and close. And that happened in our bedroom twice. And I was awake when that happened, and there was no other explanation in the house for that. I actually was quite scared. I laid looking up, waiting to see something. I didn't see anything, but yet when things come to me and things happen in this house, they're usually relatively invisible. So I don't know. There's things that happen we can't explain. Like it, you wonder where the sound's coming from. There are times when I wonder, a lot of people don't look up in the sky a lot. And so if you look up in the sky and you start paying attention, up there. Sometimes you might actually see something that you wish you didn't see. I don't know. There's just all kinds of things we can't explain in this world, and we're so busy and distracted that a lot of times we don't have time for that extra bit of detail to come into our lives. I don't know. You're out in the desert or something where you're at compared to where I am. What's
Yeah.
going on out there?
There's all kinds of stuff that happen out here in the sky. But
Mhm.
a few years ago, before Elon, that it would be like you kind of like, wow. Well, now you'll go out there like, is that Elon? So you kind of messed it up a little bit. So it's amazing, but you all, kind of often wonder. But so when we think about the things that are lower to the ground, like
Mhm.
I definitely have seen things in the sky between here and California. I know I saw a UFO, and we watched it forever driving. So, I was surprised when we went to this little store on the road that these people didn't weren't like saying, "Wow, look what happened out there." So again,
Mhm.
that was really unusual. But so things that have happened here, um, Joe is out every night. So he'll text
Mhm.
me if he sees something, but he'll see things that are low to the ground, like lights moving. And
Mhm.
I've recently have been working with about the missile silos, which are next to us. We're surrounded by, and so apparently there's a lot of paranormal history and about the missile silos or any place where they had nuclear things. So
Mhm.
I believe that we are definitely in an area, and it is dark. It's so dark. Like we see the stars. It is quiet. So if there is something unusual and you're out there and you see it, because there's nothing really else here. And like if you were in a forest, which we're not, the forest
Mhm.
has that sound. There's maybe a creek you hear. There's different things that
Yeah.
if you go to the forest, but it can be very still too. But out here
Mhm.
there's not a lot. So like on a still night, you can hear for miles, miles and miles. So we have definitely seen a lot out here, and that's one of the things I've been doing is asking others. So I definitely have a lot of other people that are talking about the things that they've seen out here, which is very, very interesting too. But you're kind of out in the country too, in a way.
Well, I'm in the middle of the city. So
Oh,
I used to live out in the country when I grew up. And so if I did compared notes, like right now I'm in a suburb. So it's all,
okay.
you don't see very much here. You just hear once in a while if something occurs or whatever. But I am an artist, and I do um, talk to the people up north, which is about 180 miles up from me, where the forest is relatively thick. And yes, they have reported hearing. We do have Sasquatches, Bigfoot, up there somewhere, and there have been reports, including one of my managers, that there was something making that loud Bigfoot noise coming toward her house one day, and scared her, so she stayed inside and everything. But the Sasquatches seem to be coming down, down from northern Minnesota. They're coming down rather than kind of staying put. So the question to that is why? Why are they coming down? Why is everything coming down? I don't know if there's really an answer. I don't study much of the Bigfoot phenomenon, but I have talked with a number of people that have given me their theories and what they've seen regarding all of that. And some of these animals have made their way coming down into the cities, which is very unusual, and very why. Why are they finding their way down here? I don't know. But when I grew up in a small town out in rural USA, as they would say. I was a country girl. And so I used to look at the stars all the time. I used to lay on top, for those of you out there that love to watch stars, I used to lay on top of my old, back in the day, it was this big old LTD, but it was a big old car that I had. I'd be on the roof of it, and I'd be laying there, and I'd be staring up into the stars, and I was just wait for something. I was looking for falling stars primarily, but I just wait. Back then, you weren't thinking much of UFOs. You were just looking for falling stars and things of that nature, and the quietness and the sound. So when you know your surroundings, it basically, you know that if there's a sound that's out of place, you know that something is in your presence that you can't always explain. But that doesn't mean that if you live in the city that you're not going to have experiences. In fact, many of us still have experiences in the city. So it just depends. It happens everywhere. So
Uh, totally. And I watch, a lot of documentaries, and the city. I truly believe that they go through portals. All of these,
mhm.
and that's how come they can get away. I just believe that they travel through portals. I'm sure they live in a space too, but I believe that that's a big part of it. And there's been some documented evidence, like the gentleman that is going to be on hopefully in January, Lee Hample. Like,
Mhm.
he was on the the Small Town Monsters, and I
Uh-huh.
just love that series. Well, he was videoing out there in and
Mhm.
I believe that was where they make the cheese, Wisconsin. So
Wisconsin, yeah.
and but he had video cameras out in the different places, because he had all this like
Mhm.
20 acres, and every single time if he found something that was dead and he put it out there, a mist would come by, and he's not out there with you. He's not there. A mist would come by, cover that at the time, at a certain time, and then it would be gone. So like you could see
Huh.
that it was no longer there. And
Huh.
that happened a lot. I know. It's so fascinating. So that was one of the things I really wanted to talk to him about, what he's been doing lately. The thing about the stars too, I was going to say, there was a time when I would sit outside with Joe like all the time. I don't do it as much anymore, but I would be communicating with the stars, and I was really big
Yeah.
about star people, stars and beings. So that was really something I was learning about, and I was really focused on it. But I could literally get, I'd ask a question: "Am I going to see a falling star?" And I'd get a yes or a no, and I'm like, "Well, if I got a yes, I'd say, well, am I going to see that within a minute or 10 minutes?" And so I would measure it down. I'd ask the questions down to the minute, to the second, and it would be like in 20 seconds, and there would be a shooting star. Like
Mhm.
it was like
Yep.
all the time happening. So like communicating with them, and I really probably should do that more again. I kind of stopped doing all that, but yeah, you're such a great person to talk
Yeah.
to. I can't believe, I think we've almost been here an hour already. I
Mhm.
don't know. I think we're probably have people that are watching us. I forgot that we're even on Facebook Live or wherever we're
Mhm.
at.
Mhm.
But I was a minute ago, I made a face because I went to the chat and I thought, oh, I'll see. And then it's like it blacked you out. And I'm like, uh-oh. I'm like, I better not touch that button until I know what I'm doing. But so I think one thing I wanted to talk about, I've been watching, and I know you don't really didn't have much to say about it, but I still thought it'd be fun to talk about, was the ghosts of Christmas past and future, and of the show that I was watching the other day, the Christmas Carol. And
Mhm.
I thought about this because we did watch them. This is one of my favorite. I'll watch it like 4 times during this month. And
Mhm.
I think it's really interesting, maybe more of a philosophical type of thing, but really those three ghosts took took them into a different realm, like into
Mhm.
the past.
Right.
Could see that. And I really believe that that's a lot of what the spirits do, is they try to show us these things to help us. And so that's what I was going to ask you about. I know you've not really had any Christmas ghost experiences, but I thought that would be interesting to talk about.
Well, one of the things that goes through my mind, and I've heard this a couple times now, and I'm actually, there was a point where I actually thought of this myself too, was people say all the time, isn't it interesting how when you see or you hear or have an experience with an apparition, or you might see an apparition, especially that it seems like they're always dated in the 1800s and not always before that. And then it just seems like it's always the magic number of the 1800s. And then something shows itself and they always say, well, why don't you see them before the 1800s? Or how often do you see warriors with their shields run through a room or something? I mean, I don't know, that'd be an awfully rare occurrence, but it just seems like whatever of the past, when it shows itself, whether it be around, I'm not even sure if Christmas time actually brings about any more spirits than any other time of the year. I don't know if loved ones gather round more so during this time of year than they do any other time, really, or when they do show themselves. How are they showing themselves, and why is that? Why are they still hanging around? Just like when they say over in Europe, oh, they don't seem to be over there anymore. Oh, they're over there. It's just a matter of factors that might bring them out, or have them illuminate themselves. But I don't know. It's interesting when things do show themselves from the past. I mean, I can give you a quick example, but it's not necessarily related to a Christmas story. I do know that when people are in big crowds, usually if you're in a crowd of 200, there's usually one or two apparitions that hitchhike their way into that crowd. And sometimes people notice that something or someone is out of place with maybe by something that they're wearing. And I'm not always talking Victorian clothes either. I'm talking clothes that might look a little bit more shabby or whatever the case may be. And I have had people tell me stories about watching a crowd walk on by and then getting their eye caught on something, walking on by wearing something that's kind of old and disheveled, and then realizing that what they're looking at has no legs. And so these things are really, they really do happen and occur. Or the situation where people are talking with individuals that they think are alive, but these people are really dead, and they just show themselves to be in human form. And I know a couple people who have actually carried on conversations with deceased individuals that have been gone for quite a long time. So whether it's the ghosts of Christmas past or whether it's the ghosts of just the past, I find it interesting, how they show themselves. And I also know about time slips meaning there's also a person I talked to that talked with an elderly gentleman that actually drove up in a very old fashioned car, and he was very old fashioned, but he was asking questions that did not make sense to the current period of time. He was asking stuff that would have maybe have happened years and years ago, and was inquiring about things, and it was just so out of place. And so you have that too, where these things really do happen, but a lot of times there's many different things about it. I don't know, what are your thoughts on all this, Mercedes?
No, I totally agree with you with that. I mean, it's like, but I definitely have seen all different dead, death or dead people in modern to all different, like way back. So, I mean, I've seen that, and I know I think it's very interesting. I think I've had like three major experiences where they just are like right there. I mean, well, maybe more than three, where they're just right there. But I think that's very fascinating, and I have spoken to a lot of people like that are just there, and then all of a sudden it just vanishes. But they literally think that that's a person. So I
Mhm.
think it's moments like those that the people become, ready for that. I mean, I think we're all on a journey, and I think that we're all, if we're supposed to be on this journey, it will happen. just like
Mhm.
me, where I didn't realize that my life would be altered, but that's
Mhm.
what happened. And so then you just begin to live your life the new way, on the new road. So
Mhm.
it's very fascinating. So
Mhm.
tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about what's your next phase, because we're going to go ahead and wrap this show up tonight. Thank you for being here. And so
Mhm.
give us what you're planning on doing next, like coming up, and then and where people can reach out and find you more.
Mhm. Well, I'm taking a couple months off, although my shows, Disembodied Voices on Paraflix, will still continue to showcase my guests because I'm way ahead of everybody's on a 6 month waiting period right now, waiting for their show to happen because that's how busy I am. So that's going to stay the same. I don't have any plans yet to write any new books. I've already got 11 out there, three which are my most popular, which I still sell, and those you can find on Amazon. If you are interested in seeing a little bit more about me, you would go to www.paranormaluniversalpress.com, and that's my website, and everything you ever wanted to know about me, including the conferences that I've spoken at, to the books I have out, to everything, a lot of the experiences I have had. You can go there. It's all, like I call it, one-stop shopping. If you need to get in touch with me, you just go to Facebook Messenger and send me a message. And what I have coming up this year is I'm going to be, at least knock on wood right now, I'll be going out to North Carolina. I'm going to be in a movie. And so I'm going to be featured in a movie, which I can't really disclose at this time any of the details about it, but just know that I'm going to be a significant part of that movie, and be telling some of my experiences and showing pictures of my experiences. So up until at least June, and then of course being at a few more conferences, probably. That's what I have in the books right now.
That's going to be so awesome. I can hardly wait to like see all that and hear about it. And I'm looking forward to the year 2024 to do great things, possibly
Mhm.
even with you.
Mhm.
So that would
Oh
be
yes.
possibly some good
Hmm.
things. So,
Yep.
well, thank you for letting everyone know about that. And I guess we'll just say good night, and to the whole audience. I still feel like I'm still like not, you still looking like we're talking to people.
Mm. I
But
know.
thank you. I know. So thank you to everyone that is watching now or watching in the future. And we want to say, send out light and love to everyone. And I am deeply wishing joy and peace to everyone. And I am praying that everyone has a happy Christmas time and a beautiful new year. And I thank you, Kelly, for being on here with me to share this last, show. And I gotta say, I'm filled with gratitude for knowing you and meeting you, and our friendship. I'm filled
Mhm.
with gratitude for Stan Fikes and Teresa Fikes for putting Webb Radio Network out, and having me be on that. And now we're expanding. So I think that this is a a lot of gratitude I feel, and thankfulness. So thank you so much for being on, and thank you to everyone listening and that follows Dr. Kelly here, because she's amazing. So now they see you and they hear you, and you're a very amazing, gifted person. And thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me on, Mercedes.
Have a beautiful night, everyone.
Mhm.